Okay, so are you ready to dive into a life story that, like, blurs the lines between visionary and con artist?
Always up for a challenge.
Right. We're talking about Edward Boykin.
Edward Boykin.
And trust me, uh, the sources on this guy
Oh, yeah.
are a wild ride.
Yeah, fill me in.
We've got historical documents, legal records, personal accounts, even some genealogy thrown in.
Oh, wow. So it's like from all angles.
Yeah, it's like piecing together a puzzle, but like some pieces are missing and other pieces just like don't seem to fit.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah. So right off the bat, we got to acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Boykin was a Confederate soldier during the Civil War.
Right.
And some of his writings, well, they express viewpoints that were typical of that era.
Yeah, which are going to be tough for modern ears, for sure.
Exactly. And we're not here to like endorse or condemn those viewpoints.
Right.
We're just trying to understand, how they might have shaped Boykin's choices and actions.
The context.
Yeah, the context, and it's going to be a challenge.
It always is.
But that's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
For sure. And it's important to remember that we're not just looking at his life through like a historical lens.
Right.
We're also thinking about how charisma can sometimes, mask intentions that are maybe not so noble.
Oh, interesting.
Like, could his charm have been a tool, to get what he wanted?
Okay, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Grifter or gifted?
Yeah.
To start answering that, let's go straight to the source.
Okay.
Boykin's own account of the fall of Richmond and the surrender at Appomattox.
Wow. Primary source.
Yeah, and his descriptions of the chaos and the desperation are so vivid, you almost feel like you're right there with him.
So he was a good writer.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's interesting because sometimes, people who were there, they don't write as evocatively as people who maybe got the story secondhand.
It's true.
Interesting.
Yeah, he talks about women stealing goods, deserters, blending into the crowds,
Wow.
and this overwhelming sense of defeat among the soldiers.
Oh, man.
It's powerful stuff. And it reminds us that these historical events weren't just, abstract moments in time.
Right.
They were lived experiences that impacted real people.
Right. Humanizes it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this one anecdote that really stuck with me.
Okay.
So Boykin describes unknowingly saluting General Robert E. Lee
Oh, wow.
because he mistook him for just a fellow soldier.
Oh, wow.
He says that brief encounter, though, it solidified Lee's image as a leader in his mind.
Interesting.
He was like this chance meeting that cemented a hero's status.
That is fascinating because it really speaks to the power of perception, especially when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
Even a fleeting moment can shape how someone is viewed and how they're remembered.
Absolutely.
But it also makes you think, was Boykin genuinely moved by this, or was he kind of crafting a narrative that would benefit him later?
Ooh, good point.
Right.
Yeah, that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. We're constantly questioning motives and trying to decipher truth from spin.
Yeah, disentangling that.
Right, and things get even more complicated when we look at a couple of stories about Boykin's horse being requisitioned for the war effort.
His horse. Okay.
Yeah, in one instance, he tells this, like, humorous tale
Yeah.
of a woman who outsmarts soldiers trying to take her husband's prized stallion.
Oh, I love those stories.
Right, it's almost like a folk tale.
Yeah.
Celebration of wit and resilience
Right.
in the face of authority.
Yeah.
But then, in another instance, he describes a quartermaster whose horse is taken.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this definite sense of satisfaction in Boykin's tone.
Oh,
Almost like he enjoyed seeing this guy lose his prized possession.
that's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, that shift in tone is really crucial.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about his sense of fairness
Uh-huh.
and whether he was truly operating within the, accepted rules even in a wartime context.
Yeah.
Was he using his position for like personal reasons to
What's
get
that?
back at people?
Okay, so was he a man simply navigating a difficult situation? Or was he already showing signs of using his charm and his storytelling to justify actions that were maybe questionable?
It's a great question, and it becomes even more relevant as we move into Boykin's post-war life
Okay.
and this fascinating legal case that went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Boykin v. Alabama.
Boykin v. Alabama, exactly.
So this case, decades after the Civil War,
Wow.
centered on Boykin's guilty pleas to 5 armed robbery charges.
5.
5.
Wow.
And the Supreme Court ultimately overturned his death sentences,
Oh, wow.
questioning whether he fully understood the implications of those pleas.
So, like, informed consent.
Exactly.
Did he really get what was
Right.
happening?
Right. Did he truly grasp his constitutional rights and the potential consequences? Or was there some manipulation involved? Were his pleas a calculated move by a shrewd mind? Or was he a victim of a system that didn't afford him proper protection?
Wow. Well, a question.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even within the legal system, things aren't always black and white.
Oh, never.
Power dynamics and manipulation can play a role, raising serious questions about justice and fairness.
For sure.
And it makes you wonder, did Boykin, with his charisma and his storytelling ability, manage to sway the court even from a position of weakness?
It's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we'll delve deeper into the details of that case in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, it's worth considering this. If Boykin was capable of using his charm to potentially manipulate legal proceedings, could that same charisma have been a tool for deception throughout his life?
It's a good question to ponder.
That's the puzzle we're trying to piece together, so stick with us, because this deep dive into Edward Boykin's life is only getting started.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we left off with this big question. Was Edward Boykin using his charisma to mask some less than admirable intentions?
Right, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
To dig a little deeper into that, let's go back to his personal account of the fall of Richmond and the surrender at Appomattox.
Okay.
Now remember, he's writing this after the war,
Uh,
so there's already a layer of potential, spin.
right, hindsight is 20/20 and all that.
Exactly, and that's what makes primary sources like this so fascinating.
Oh, yeah, for
We're
sure.
not just reading history,
Yeah.
we're analyzing the perspective of someone who lived through it.
Yeah, it's like a time capsule.
Right. And in Boykin's case, that perspective is layered with this heavy dose of Confederate loyalty.
Right. He was definitely a true believer.
Yeah, totally. And he consistently portrays Confederate soldiers, especially General Lee, in this heroic light.
Uh-huh. Almost like larger than life figures.
Right. It's almost like he's trying to cement their legacy, even in the face of defeat.
Trying to control the narrative.
Yeah. Could this be part of a larger strategy? Is he shaping the narrative to benefit himself or the cause he believes in?
It's possible, for sure, and it's especially interesting when you look at how he describes those who didn't share his unwavering devotion to the Confederacy.
Yeah, he uses pretty harsh language for deserters and those he saw as, profiting from the war.
Uh-huh.
It's like he's painting them as almost villainous figures.
Creating a clear divide, right? The honorable Confederates versus everyone else.
Exactly. This black and white thinking, this us versus them mentality.
It's a classic hallmark of a certain type of leader, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's a tactic that can be incredibly effective in, rallying support and solidifying power.
Oh, yeah, for sure. By painting a clear enemy and portraying yourself as a righteous defender, you can gain a devoted following.
But it can also be a really slippery slope.
Right? Oh, absolutely.
Same powerful rhetoric can be used to manipulate and control.
To justify questionable actions, to silence dissent.
Right. It's the age-old question. Is this leadership for the greater good, or is it just self-serving ambition disguised as virtue?
Right. A very good question.
So let's put on our skeptical hats for a minute and look closely at how Boykin frames certain events.
Okay.
Remember that story about his horse being requisitioned?
Yeah.
In one instance, he seems to celebrate a woman's cleverness in outsmarting the soldiers.
Right.
But then when a quartermaster's horse is taken, he's almost gleeful about it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that shift in tone is really significant.
Yeah.
It reveals this sense of vindictiveness,
Yeah.
a willingness to exploit situations for personal gain,
Yeah.
even if it means, bending or breaking the rules.
That's not a good look.
Right. And it makes you wonder, was he always operating with this kind of self-serving mentality? Was
No.
he already using his charm and storytelling to justify maybe questionable actions, even during the chaos of war?
It's definitely a possibility we should consider, and it makes his later legal troubles even more intriguing.
Boykin v. Alabama.
Right, Boykin v. Alabama, which
Mhm.
raises those serious questions about informed consent and potential manipulation within the legal system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could Boykin, with his gift for persuasion, have been manipulating the system to his advantage, even while claiming to be a victim of circumstance? Did he use his charisma to play the role of the wronged party, garnering sympathy and maybe even influencing the outcome of the case?
It's a compelling theory, and it speaks to a larger point we've been kind of circling around throughout this whole deep dive.
Which is,
The ability of a charismatic individual to blur the lines between truth and deception, to make it hard to tell genuine intentions from calculated manipulation.
Okay, so we've dug deep into Boykin's wartime experiences, and we've started to see this pattern of maybe questionable actions and potential manipulation.
Yeah, some red flags for sure.
Now, let's add another layer to this puzzle, his family history.
Oh, okay.
Remember those genealogical records we found?
Right, tracing his lineage back to early settlers in Virginia.
It was fascinating, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it also raised some intriguing questions.
Okay.
Did his family's history, their values, their beliefs, did any of that contribute to the choices he made?
Right. We know he had a large family, and his descendants, spread out across several
So it's
states.
a big family tree.
It makes you wonder, did he see himself as carrying on a legacy, upholding a certain set of ideals, even if those ideals might be seen as flawed or harmful from a modern perspective?
It's definitely possible, and it's important to remember that historical figures, even those who, achieved some level of notoriety, they weren't operating in a vacuum.
Right.
Their actions were shaped by the, societal norms, the
Yeah.
power structures,
Mm.
the cultural beliefs of their time.
So how do we reconcile that historical context with the possibility that Boykin might have been using his charisma to manipulate situations and advance his own interest?
It's a tricky balance to strike.
Yeah, it is. And it's a balance we have to strike whenever we're evaluating someone who lived in a different era, especially someone who might have been a master of
A
persuasion.
master manipulator.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we've got this complex picture of Edward Boykin emerging, the Confederate soldier, the skilled storyteller, the potential manipulator.
Yeah.
And now, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to fast forward to the present day
Okay.
and meet a descendant who's making his own mark,
Oh, really?
albeit in a very different field.
It's getting interesting.
Ready for some more twists and turns, because this modern-day Edward Boykin is also a leader, but he's operating in the world of education.
The world of education.
Wow, okay.
And just like his ancestor, he's not afraid to express strong opinions, even on controversial topics.
So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
It seems that ability to command attention and stir up debate might run in the family. So stick with us as we explore the connections and the disconnections between past and present,
I'm hooked.
and ask the question, does this modern-day Boykin share more than just a name with his controversial ancestor?
Can't wait to find out.
Okay, so we've traveled through time from Civil War battlefields to a landmark Supreme Court case, and now we're landing in the present day.
Full circle.
We've uncovered some pretty compelling evidence that Edward Boykin might have used his charm and storytelling to kind of manipulate situations to his advantage.
Yeah, a bit of a puppet master.
But now we have to ask, is this a pattern that repeats itself through generations?
Ooh, good question. Because it turns out Edward Boykin has a modern-day descendant, also named Edward Boykin, who's making waves in the field of education.
Really?
And like his ancestor, he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
Oh, so the apple doesn't fall far from the tree?
It's almost too perfect, right? We've been digging into this question of charisma and manipulation, and bam, we find a descendant who's also a leader, but in a completely different arena.
What are the chances?
Talk about a twist.
So fill me in. What's this modern-day Edward Boykin all about?
So he's a retired Air Force veteran,
Okay.
and he's built a career around training teachers in classroom management and differentiated instruction.
Interesting.
He's got a website full of resources, blog posts, even online courses.
Wow, he's really put himself out there.
Yeah, he's clearly passionate about education, and he's not shy about sharing his opinions on how to improve the system.
And those opinions are?
Let's just say he's not afraid to stir the pot.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, he's pretty critical of traditional teaching methods and anything he sees as a bureaucratic roadblock to effective education.
Sounds like he's taking on the establishment.
He is, and it's interesting, he's got that same outspokenness, that willingness to challenge the status quo that we saw in his ancestor.
The Boykin blood.
Right. But here's the crucial question. Is he using that platform to genuinely advocate for positive change, or is there something more self-serving going on?
Right. Is he like his ancestor, a master persuasion who's building a following and maybe even profiting from it?
It's tricky, right? Because on the surface, his message is all about empowering teachers, improving learning outcomes for students. He talks about meeting the needs of diverse learners, creating engaging classroom environments,
Right.
equipping teachers with the tools they need to be successful.
All very admirable goals.
They are. But we have to remember the patterns we've observed in his ancestor's life.
Right. The manipulation, the self-serving actions masked as good intentions.
So how do we assess this modern-day Edward Boykin? Do we give him the benefit of the doubt, Or do we view his actions with a healthy dose of skepticism?
It's a tough one. I don't know.
And it brings us back to the central question of this whole deep dive. How do we separate the visionary leader from the con artist? When does charisma cross the line into manipulation?
It's the age-old
It
question.
really is. So how do we answer it?
Well, I think it comes down to a few key things: transparency, accountability, and impact.
Okay, let's break those down. What do you mean by transparency?
Well, a genuine leader is open about their motivations, their methods, their funding sources. They're not afraid to answer tough questions or to be held accountable.
Are not hiding behind a carefully constructed persona.
Exactly. No smoke and mirrors.
So with this modern-day Edward Boykin, we'd want to look at how he's funding his educational initiatives.
Right.
Is he transparent about his business model? Is he willing to engage in open dialogue with critics?
Exactly.
And then there's accountability.
Yeah, a true leader is willing to be judged based on the results they achieve, not just on their, persuasive rhetoric.
They're not just all talk.
Right. They welcome feedback, they learn from their mistakes, and they're constantly striving to improve.
So in this case, we'd want to look at the impact of his teacher training programs.
Yeah, are teachers actually seeing positive changes in their classrooms? Are student outcomes improving?
Right. And that leads us to the final piece of the puzzle: impact.
A visionary leader is all about making a positive difference in the world.
Right. Their actions are driven by a desire to improve the lives of others.
Not to advance their own careers or line their own pockets.
So we're looking for evidence that this modern-day Edward Boykin is truly making a difference in the lives of teachers and students. Are his programs leading to more effective teaching, greater student engagement, a more equitable education system?
Those are the real metrics that matter.
They are, and that's where you, the listener, come in. We've presented the evidence, explored the connections, and raised the tough questions. Now it's up to you to decide. Is this modern-day Edward Boykin carrying on a legacy of manipulation? Or is he using his platform to create positive change in the world of education?
It's a real head-scratcher.
It is a decision that requires, careful consideration, critical thinking, and a willingness to look beyond that surface charm.
Don't be fooled by the razzle-dazzle.
Because in a world where charisma and controversy often collide, the line between visionary and con artist can be incredibly difficult to discern.
It really can.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep asking those tough questions.
Always.